Okay, so we're now more than 50. I suggest that we start this side event to make sure that we have time to take questions after the very rich program that we planned today. So let me start by presenting myself. So I'm Laurène. I'm the current chair of the Civil Society Forum on Drugs. I'm also working for a French NGO who's a professional network of people working on questions of addictions. And I'm really happy to be moderating the event today. So on behalf of the organizer, and of the civil society forums, I'd like to thank the European Commission and the European Union for their support and sponsorship of the event, as well as all the other sponsors, the Czech government, the Spanish government, the Pompidou Group, the French NGO Platform on Drugs, and a special thanks to the FEDITO, who's a Belgium NGO who has been also quite active in organizing the event. I'll also start by taking a minute of your time to mention the situation in Ukraine. As you probably know, the Civil Society Forum on Drugs is deeply shocked by the war and the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine. We see millions of Ukrainians are losing their homes as they flee bombing of apartment buildings as well as hospitals and schools. In the cities where active military actions are taking place, people don't have access to the basic needs like food, water, or essential medicines. So we are deeply concerned. We stand in solidarity, obviously, with the people of Ukraine, and in particular with Ukrainian civil society organizations, people who use drugs, and those who are courageously ensuring the continuity of drug services, and there are many. As people are moving towards Western Ukraine, cities are overflowing and all programs are working at the limits of their capacity. For instance, we know that clinics providing opioid agonist treatment or other controlled medicines do not have the capacity to stock enough medicine for several months, and regions like Kharkov, Kherson, and Sumy are struggling to restock their supplies. Our civil society, we call on the international community, on the European Union, and on all United Nations entities, particularly on the UNODC and the INCB, to work towards ensuring that people impacted or displaced by the war, including people who use drugs and other marginalized populations, continue to have access to health supplies, medication, and drug services, as well as to safe, open, and uninterrupted humanitarian corridors. Having said that, I'll offer that we go back to the subject that's gathering us today, this morning. So civil society and civil society involvement. I would like just to share a few words regarding the CSFD's work to follow and develop civil society. We will talk it at length with our brilliant speakers, but I just wanted to mention that and to underline that we do represent the concerned parties as civil society. We do represent the population who are directly impacted and concerned by the policies developed both nationally and internationally, especially for communities, people who use drugs, and professionals working on the field, as well as for recovery addicts. Issues and approaches that we push for are the results of our discussions throughout the forum and our expertise from a very large scale of concerned communities. We therefore push for evidence-based programs, action and ideas that are moving away from purely ideological approaches to be efficient in the guarantee of human rights and well-being and access to health of concerned people. Now, we can't do that without hearing properly the voices of civil society. That's our main issue here. We do have good practices examples of including civil society in the debates and in the discussion. I'm thinking here, for instance, of the French civil society platform of NGOs who's interacting with the diplomatic representation and with the government on a very large level. But the situation is worrisome and it could be improved. And it's worrisome, especially currently with the shrinking of the ECOSOC approval process in New York. I'm sure we have time to discuss that through the side event, which I'm now going to present. So we do have plenty of very good speakers this morning, and I really want to thank them for taking the time to discuss with us today. We will start with Marie-Aude Tannou, who's a policy officer at the European Commission. Then we will have the pleasure to listen to Peter Sarosi, who is the executive director of the Rights Reporter Foundation and also the current chair of the civil society working group, dedicated working group. Then we're going to hear from Matej Kosir, who's currently the vice chair of the Vienna NGO committee. Congratulations, Matej, on that appointment and election, and who's also the director of the organization UTRIP. Then we're going to hear from Joana Canedo, who's working with EuroNPUD and the NGO GAT in Portugal. And finally, but not the least, we're going to hear from Katerina Orakova from Czech Republic. And maybe if we have a minute, we're going to listen also to someone from the Pompidou group. Just a quick logistic aspects. You will have plenty of experience now with the Zoom webinars, but if you want to ask a question, please feel free to do so in the chat so I can gather them and relay them at the end of the discussions. And if you have a question for a directed or a specific panelist, do think about mentioning it so you can see that. Thank you very much. I'm now going to give the floor to our first speaker, Marie-Aude Tannou from the European Commission. Marie-Aude, the floor is yours.
Yes, good morning. Good morning, everyone. So first of all, let me introduce myself. Indeed, my name is Marie-Aude Tannou, and I'm working in the European Commission in a team working on drugs in Directorate General for Migration and Home Affairs. And as Laurène pointed out, there is something in our minds at this point, and I cannot start my intervention without referring to Russia's military aggression against Ukraine. As pointed out by Laurène, the situation has implications for all citizens, including the civil society in Ukraine and people who use drugs. And I want to stress that the EU strongly condemns Russia's unprovoked and unjustified military aggression against Ukraine, which is in violation of the UN Charter and of international law. But today we are here to discuss civil society participation to drug policy making, and I'm glad to deliver opening remarks on behalf of the European Commission. Civil society's involvement is very important for the policymaking at EU level, in which the Commission takes part. And my contribution today will be to highlight the importance of maintaining and of increasing such participation at all levels, not only at the European one. The European Commission itself has been nurturing the experience of civil society organizations and giving visibility to their voice at EU level by supporting the Commission expert group Civil Society Forum on Drugs. And I would like to thank the organizers of today's side event for inviting us to take the floor on this topic. When we use the term civil society, we're covering a very broad and varied group of organizations. They represent both social and economic players, and by means of example, some organizations represent institutions active in prevention, harm reduction, while others represent drug users and their families. All these organizations are able to bring very diverse and documented feedback to us on the actions that they undertake in their fields of activity. This means that they are the holders of very valuable information, and this information is highly relevant for decision-making regarding drugs. Civil society can bring us new information in a wide variety of ways. There is research that is being carried out, there is experience that is being gathered on the field, and we can also collect feedback from civil society organizations on the effectiveness and implementation of previous policies, which can guide in the formulation of new ones. So civil society involvement allows early identification and anticipation of problems, and it contributes to the drawing of efficient policies. That's why in the European Commission, we are convinced that it is key to involve civil society at all stages of the decision-making process, and in particular during policy formulation. Civil society organizations can bring very diverse opinions, as I said, and ideas to our attention. And this can allow to take evidence-based and balanced decisions in respect of the drugs phenomenon. So having stressed the benefits of involving civil society in drug policy making, I would briefly highlight the commitments that have been taken in this respect, both at international and EU levels. At international level, I would like to recall that one of the commitments to effectively address and counter the world drug problem that was outlined in the 2016 UNGAS document was to involve civil society in the development and implementation of prevention programs. The 2019 ministerial declaration stressed again the role played by civil society and underscored the importance of promoting relevant partnership. And as part of this week's event, being myself in Vienna, and despite the fact that this 65th Commission on Narcotic Drugs is held in a hybrid way, I'm pleased to see the involvement of civil society organizations, both in the rooms and in the exchanges and by the high number of side events that are organized. I'm also pleased to see participation very high to those side events. And I want to reassure you that enhancing the role of civil society in these international fora remains one of the EU's objectives. And turning to the European Union's level, which is the one I'm better placed to speak of, I want to confirm that there is a strong commitment towards civil society involvement in drugs policy making at EU level. The commitment is not new. It has been a long-standing engagement of the EU. It started even before the 2006 Green Paper that aimed to structure exchanges between the Commission and civil society organizations. And most recently, it was reasserted in the EU drug strategy and EU action plan. These two documents are the basis for the EU drug policy for the period 2021 to 2025. And they reaffirm the commitment of the EU to a balanced, evidence-based approach and to address the drugs phenomenon in Europe with preservation of human rights at its core. The strategy highlights as one of the priority areas to address the need to promote civil society participation and to ensure sustainable funding. The action plan, therefore, also includes concrete action that should be undertaken in this respect. And we will work on that in the next 3 to 4 years in order to further strengthen civil society participation at member state, EU, and international levels. On the EU side, it's also very clear that the meaningful participation and involvement of civil society is key to implement some of the actions listed in the action plan. So it's key to implement the actual policies. So a strong cooperation is necessary to make sure we can work effectively towards our goals to protect and promote public health and to offer a high level of security and of well-being for the general public. We're therefore continue engaging to involve civil society organization when preparing our own policies, but also we want to promote such involvement in other fora. At the same time,
Marie-Aude, can you hear us? Oh, I think we had a problem with the connection from the European Commission. Oh, so sorry about that. Okay. Steve, can you hear me? Yeah.
Hi, yeah, I can hear you. I think it's frozen for everybody.
Yeah.
I think we've lost Marie-Aude.
Okay, are you in contact with her?
I'll resend her the link.
Yeah.
Maybe Adria can send her a message if possible.
Yeah, I will write to them, but yeah, I would go on.
Thank you very much. So what I suggest is that we give the floor. Ah, she's back. Okay, Marie-Aude.
Sorry, I don't know what happened. I guess the hot or internet is not functioning that well. Sorry about that. I don't know where you lost me, but I was concluding. I was really willing to stress that we're aiming to work together in order to find best practices and possible improvements, and that the quality standards drawn by the Civil Society Forum on Drugs are a step in that direction. And thanks to you for inviting us, for inviting the Commission, and I look forward to the intervention and discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and we're glad to have you back. We are indeed working very closely with the European Commission as TSFD, obviously, because we are an expert group to the European Commission, both on implementation, but also on the drafting of communities' drug policy agendas and action plan. Thank you very much. I will now give the floor to Peter Sarosi. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Laurène, and good morning, everyone. I'm really grateful to be able to speak to you on civil society involvement today.
Peter,
yes,
we are seeing the wrong side of your screen, I think. We are not. Yeah, if you can just switch.
Is this now better, or? Do you see my slides now?
We see your slide, but we see the PowerPoint. We don't see the slideshow.
Oh, okay. Sorry for that.
You should, yeah, don't worry.
What about now?
No, no change. You might want to start with the slideshow. Yeah, that works perfectly. Okay. Thank you very much.
I'm really sorry because I have two monitors, and anyway. So thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today about civil society involvement. And as a previous speaker said, I'm the chair of the Civil Society Forum's working group on civil society involvement right now, and I represent a human rights organization based in Budapest, Hungary. As also previous speakers pointed out, there is a growing consensus that civil society involvement is relevant and very important in drug policy decision making. What our working group attempted to contribute to is to improve the quality of civil society involvement. That is how we can make civil society involvement into drug policies more meaningful, and how can we define meaningfulness. And why do we need that? Why do we need to speak about quality of civil society involvement? Is because previous studies conducted by the forum pointed out that there is a gap between the ideal scenario, how it should be, and how often it is in reality. What is the experience of NGOs? And in the ideal scenario, a high quality civil society involvement means that it is mutually relevant and meaningful to both decision makers and civil society, that it ensures a balanced and competence-based representation of civil society. It is used, the mechanism is used in preparing and evaluating decisions, and an adequate funding is provided, and it is sustainable and formal mechanism. However, NGOs often report that the civil society involvement in which they participate is sometimes it's a box ticking exercise, so it's not really meaningful for them. It is only, to put in the window that some NGOs were involved. There is no funding for the exercise. Sometimes the participants of this involvement are cherry-picked, so that there is no balanced representation of communities who are the most affected, for example. And sometimes it is only used to rubber stamp decisions rather than really involve civil society into the preparation of decisions and creating the concept. And often civil society involvement is ad hoc, it's informal, and there are no real structures, mechanisms for that. So we were wondering, if we have quality standards, minimum quality standards for demand reduction in interventions such as prevention, treatment, and harm reduction, why can't we do the same quality standards for civil society involvement? So some principles, some guidelines, to how to make civil society involvement more meaningful, and that's what we try to do. We did 3 steps to bridge this gap. First, we reviewed the available literature on civil society involvement in the field of drug policies in Europe. Second, based on this finding, we created quality standards of civil society involvement, published in a report again. And third, we conducted an online questionnaire survey among civil society organizations in Europe to assess the quality of what existing mechanisms are and how meaningful are they as perceived by participants themselves. All these materials are or will be found on the Civil Society Forum's website. So why do we need quality standards and why are they useful? Why this document is useful for both decision makers and civil society? We think that this is as a tool, as a guideline, it can be used by decision makers when they are designing how to involve civil society. So to show them the necessary steps in planning, implementing, and evaluating the process, identify the actors, the civil society actors, and create a selection criteria for a balanced representation. Create mechanisms to involve the civil society and monitor and evaluate the process. And this can ensure for governments that the whole endeavor is cost efficient for them. And it is also good for civil society because it enables civil society to make their voice heard, represent their communities. It can ensure transparency and accountability of the process. It provides a point of reference when civil society organizations feel that the process is not meaningful, and it is a tool to evaluate the performance of government in terms of civil society involvement. So how does the tool look like? And this is the main scheme of what we worked on together with FU International and other members of the Civil Society Forum. Based on the European Drug Prevention Quality Standards that was adopted a few years ago, we created a cycle of planning, implementing, and evaluating of civil society involvement that consists of 6 steps. So the first step is mapping and selection of civil society participants. The second step is formulate the mandate for the mechanism. Third, setting the agenda for the civil society engagement. Then the 4 is involving civil society in drafting and preparing policy decisions. The 5th step is involving civil society in the implementation, and the 6th is monitoring and evaluation. And each and every steps, 9 overarching quality criteria should be applied. And these criteria are that the process should be transparent, balanced, it should be timely, that governments should be approachable and all participants should be approachable, that all participants should be competent, the process should be open and trustful, for the relationship should be open and trustful, the autonomy of participants should be respected. It should be sustainable. What does it mean? It means that adequate funding and human resources are needed to do this. And all participants should perceive this as a relevant process. So we also did a questionnaire survey among civil society participants, and we asked them what kind of civil society mechanisms exist in the field of drug policy in their countries and also in municipal levels, and how do they perceive the quality of these mechanisms. And our survey was completed by 80 valid respondents and from 26 European countries. And the good news is that according to the vast majority of respondents, there are some existing mechanisms in most countries and cities of Europe to involve civil society into the drug policy decision making. So that's a good news. So like 80% of the respondents said that there are these mechanisms. However, the bad news is that mostly they are informal ad hoc mechanisms, so they are not stable, sustainable, structured mechanisms. And also the majority of respondents said that the quality of these exercises are not adequate. So especially at the weakest point was funding, so that there is not adequate funding for civil society involvement, and many NGOs expressed that they feel that they are neglected or not heard enough. So even if there is a channel where they can speak to governments, but their propositions are not really taken into consideration when the decisions are made. So our research also identified challenges and opportunities ahead of civil society involvement, and we could see that civil society organizations are not only, that they are in many European countries, they are the main service providers in demand reduction, harm reduction. But we could also establish that the vibrant civil society is an essential part of democracy too. So that means that civil society builds an identity of citizenship, even for the most vulnerable members of society. So it gives the feeling that you are part of society. And there were several good practices of successful partnerships with governments in many countries, as mentioned by Laurène. I don't have time to mention, but in the report you can read about some formal existing mechanisms. The power of networking, so that NGOs are able to shape public opinion, to change misconceptions of society and prejudices of society. They are able to empower the most marginalized people of society. And at the times of crisis, as shown at the COVID-19 epidemic and the current Eastern European refugee crisis, then you can see that NGOs are much more resilient and flexible to respond to new crisis situations. So they are really essential to give effective response to that challenges. So the challenges that were identified by NGOs are that there is a rising populism and authoritarianism, even in Europe, in the central part of Europe, which comes with sidelining and scapegoating civil activism. There are increasing attacks against vulnerable communities in several countries. There were some new legal and administrative barriers that are violating the right of free association, that many donors, especially international donors, retreat, and there is a funding crisis for several demand and harm reduction services, especially in the eastern part of Europe. And many organizations have only capacity to provide services, but they don't really have resources to do advocacy, which is a very serious problem. Just a few examples from what do we speak about when we speak about shrinking space for civil society. So that means that there are some extreme examples from the Russian Federation, where the so-called foreign agent laws are scapegoating and repressing civil society organizations, including those working in the field of demand and harm reduction. There are unfortunately similar trends can be observed in some European Union member states, such as Poland and Hungary. And why do we speak about shrinking space? Is that there is lack of funding, but also there are some services closed, but also there is a shrinking legitimacy of NGOs and shrinking legal remedy channels for NGOs. That means that our legitimacy is questioned. They say that, we are not a legitimate part of policy making, and the policy making is only the business of an elected class of politicians. But actually, in a real democracy, between the elections, people should have the possibility to participate in decision making through exercising their right of the freedom of association. We also made some recommendations to policymakers and civil societies. First, that member states should develop formal mechanisms as a platform to involve civil society. And of course, our tool, the quality standards, can be used, and we think that it should be used when these mechanisms are established in the country or city level. It is not only the task of governments to improve, but also civil society needs to improve its networking and do advocacy more effectively. But we should also recognize that advocacy is work. So it is just like providing services. It requires funding from governments and donors. So not only we need donations or funding for services, but we need funding for advocacy too. And it is all parties' best interest that we should go beyond box ticking, and we just use the creative power of civil society. And by concluding, I cannot avoid to mention that, you know, when hundreds and thousands of refugees are coming through my country, my city every day, and this terrible war is waging in a few hundred kilometers from where I'm sitting, and we try to help all people who are escaping the war, that I think this is a very good lesson learned for us about civil society as well, because, you know, people are asking how people can do this. And just as individuals have moral consciousness, countries has moral consciousness, and that's called civil society. And if you repress civil society, if you repress a vibrant civil society, then the country will be able to do terrible atrocities such as represented in Russia. So I think the best safeguard of peace, prosperity, and democracy is a vibrant, independent, and well-funded civil society. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Peter, for this very broad presentation and for keeping in the time and mentioning all those questions. I'd just like to underline the question of the access to citizenship and the question of civil society as a good example of how a democracy is functioning. I think we can all agree that this is key issue in our contemporary context. So I'll give the floor now to Matej. Matej, if you want to speak and take the floor is yours. Thank you.
Okay, hello. Thank you very much for inviting me to this important event, and greetings from Vienna, where is a CND at the moment, and we are trying to unshrinking the space for civil society. And just after this side event, we have already a meeting with Executive Director of UNODC, Ms. Gada Wali, which is also the purpose of this meeting is also to emphasize the importance of civil society at the global level, global policy, drug policy level. So we are here in Vienna to do as much as possible to unshrink this space for civil society at a global arena. Okay, I'm here also on behalf of Vienna NGO Committee as the deputy chair. So for those who are not familiar with Vienna NGO Committee, we provide a vital link between NGOs and Vienna-based agencies involved in setting drug policy, including CND, INCB, and UNODC. And also, as you can see, we promote collaboration, we enhance communication with UN agencies, and we also ensure balanced representation of civil society organizations in different policy and decision-making processes at UN level in the field of drug policy. We are an organization or network of civil society organizations with more than 320 member organizations from almost 100 countries across the world. And you have a link there to see who are the members of the Vienna NGO Committee. We understand that, of course, especially after pandemic started in March 2020, there are many barriers and challenges for civil society organizations to be involved in international fora in the field of drug policy. However, we actually conducted the survey among civil society organizations, and we actually found out that the survey showed that 80% would like to retain at least some elements of online engagement, especially virtual hybrid side events, open also to people not registered for the main CND. So there are not only the bad things happened during the pandemic, but also we see some positives as well in civil society engagement, especially with more space, increased space for civil society organizations to participate, to be involved in some discussions at the global level regarding the drug policy. And also our activities were of course affected by pandemic, like for all of us, but the increased online engagement allowed us to develop webinars in cooperation with UNODC. And in this period, 2021-2022, we delivered more than 10 such events, including on the World Drug Report, international standards on prevention, and then on treatment as well, developments on HIV/AIDS, UNODC data strategy, the International Drug Control Convention, access to controlled medicine, etc. There are several events which would probably be difficult to organize here in Vienna or wherever in the world with such increased and good participation of different civil society organizations. So from this point of view, we actually increased civil society engagement in different discussions at the global level. Also our events, of course, online events reached more than 500 different civil society organizations across the world, many more than we previously engaged with. So in this case, we can see a good improvement of civil society engagement as well. Also, membership of Vienna NGO Committee increased and grew faster in the past 2 years than in previous years, which you can see from this graph. To conclude, maybe, and then probably it's also an opportunity for me to say some words about Slovenian reality, because I come from Slovenia. And I can also say that in our case, as a prevention NGO in Slovenia, our space also, our civil society engagement also increased in this period, and is connected also with CND, because we initiated CND resolution on early prevention, which is now discussed at CND in committee as a whole. Probably if everything will be okay with the political situation, this resolution will be adopted and then implemented in the following years. We are also very actively as an NGO involved in the Slovenian presidency of EU, which was also increased engagement of us as civil society organizations. So to conclude, not only bad things happened to NGOs due to the pandemic in the last 2 years, there is increased civil society engagement in online events and activities, including in low and middle income countries, because we provided several small grants to civil society organizations from low and middle income countries to broadcast the events in Vienna at CND. So they had and they still have this week an opportunity to gather a lot of civil society representatives in their own cities and broadcast the plenary, and also to watch side events, etc. So to increase civil society engagement in this forum. And of course, it is obvious that the future will be hybrid. We will try to keep some of these positives also when the pandemic is completely over and we go back to normal. Hopefully next year at CND, we will be already a crowd of NGO representatives here in the halls. But at the moment, it's quite it's very sad to see the empty halls, not very representatives of civil society here in person. But we, as the NGO committee board, we try to be involved in discussions with several UN agencies. We will also provide space for other NGOs to ask questions to INCB, to UNODC, to C&D chair. So this is still ongoing activity, regardless of the situation. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, you can always ask here or by email. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matej, for this strong presentation. I will now give the floor to Joana Canedo. Joana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Laurène. So good morning, everyone. As a European Network of People Use Drugs member, I belong to a new generation of advocates joining the CSFD, benefiting also from the CSFD program. Thanks for the invitation. I'm happy to contribute on our journey towards a participatory and democratic European mechanism. It's an opportunity today to be part of this initiative, where we are able to contribute to the design of new policies, strategies, action plans, minimum quality standards for interventions, and contribute to action, research, and international relations, pushing for EU drug policy potentialities of drug users communities, and enable artisans and drug user community to work further and push for progressive drug policy reforms. For the past months, EuroNPUD has designed an advocacy program led by Rui Coimbra and some other advocates, where policy dialogue meetings were possible with different institutions meeting our community goals and aspirations. For the past years, it was also possible to see great organizations represented at European level at the CSFD, raising community voices such as EuroNPUD and so many others that I was also lucky to be part of. Secondly, I would like to speak on intersectionality and address that drug policy reform voices should be integrated into bottom-up and grassroots state-sponsored and European-sponsored movements. Drug users organizing and program must be informed by an intersectional lens. It is critical to recognize and respond to how the risks and harms experienced by people who use drugs are shaped by intersections of class, race, gender, sexuality, and ability. It is also important to recognize the intersections between drug user activism, anti-poverty activism, housing activism, and sexual health activism. Drug user organizing and action should make space for collective action and solidarity when there are overlapping positionalities, concerns, and priorities. So today, I take the opportunity of speaking here to state that as community, we oppose approaches to preventing drug use-related harms that are based on abstinence. We enjoy this opportunity to demand accurate information about the risks and benefits of different drugs and how to practice different kinds of harm reduction, including the evidence-based knowledge produced by the community of people who use drugs. We believe that people use drugs rights and practices can be shared with caregivers, staff, providers, workers, and decision makers from the various systems of care and supervision that people use drugs often traverse. In this discussion, we need to account the needs of BIPOC youth, gender diverse and queer people use drugs, and self-identified young women. There should be dedicated programming and hours for young women, gender diverse and queer people working in the different programs that concern to people use drugs. And we advise that mobile outreach, safer consumption rooms are critical to making harm reduction and other forms of support more accessible to people use drugs. We have highlighted these issues as well as peer professionalization in our contributions to EU strategies and action plans for the past years. So therefore, we invite member states to put it in practice. We recall on the importance of stop pathologizing people use drugs. Start recognizing that we have human rights to make decisions for ourselves and keep ourselves safe. As part of bigger decisions and participative process, it's our duty as community and part of high-level decisions to later avoid at local level process of re-traumatization for members of the community by professionals and decision makers. We need to start discussing safer supply, especially considering those experiencing structural oppression. We, as people use drugs in the context of greater privilege, such as myself, as well as allies, should focus energy on fostering and extending the activism of the context of street involvement, making visible the invisible, fighting back structural violence, and reducing barriers to drug users when it comes to cultural, economic, civic, and health rights. That is why I'm taking the opportunity to raise these issues over here. So I think it's important to remember the Action 48 of the EU Action Plan 2021-2025 that invites us to promote and encourage the active and meaningful participation and involvement of civil society, including non-governmental organizations, young people, people use drugs, clients of drug-related services, and the scientific community and other experts in development, implementation, and evaluation of drug policies, and provide an appropriate level of research for all drug services for the involvement of civil society. Thirdly, and since I'm a Portuguese girl, we have a successful case study around peer work. We assist nowadays to the professionalization of peer workers in harm reduction programs, prevention, treatment, reintegration, housing programs, and gender-based violence resources. This has happened because of years of struggle and work of civil society organizations and drug user activism, where community is nowadays represented to ensure our rights as users are represented also in working conditions, low threshold works, non-abstinent related, and the scaling up of employability programs are worth to ensure our rights and our access to equal opportunities. Therefore, we invite all member states to rethink drug user working conditions and to endorse special employability programs for peers of drug user community, paying peers for the work, as it happens in Portugal. Related to this, as future priorities, we reclaim our human rights for sure, but also more funding so we can have our voices represented and actually our work recognized as any other professional work, living experience, but for sure also based on action research and advocacy, and we are good at it. We are tired of working on a volunteering basis. And last but not least, I would like to state solidarity with drug users in Ukraine and inviting you to endorse input statements highlighting our solidarity with Ukrainian network of people who use drugs, Ukrainian network of women who use drugs, and all Ukrainian peers, colleagues, and friends against the invasion of the country by Russia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joana, for this very strong statement and for underlining the absolute need for recognition and substantial funding for the involvement of impacted communities. I think that's a key issue, and it goes way beyond the question of the European level also. So I'll just take the floor for a second, just to say that it's now 10 to 10, and please use the Q&A space for your questions to the panelists. And I'll now give the floor to Katerina Orakova from Czech Republic. Good morning, Katerina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Laurène. Good morning, colleagues, and thank you for this opportunity to briefly share how we collaborate with civil society in the Czech Republic and share key aspects for cooperation from our point of view. The cooperation and involvement of civil society is a long-term and also key aspect of modern national drug policy. The role of civil society is also defined in the national strategy. The representatives of civil society are members of Governmental Council for Drug Policy Coordination. That is the main body for drug policy at governmental level. And they are also invited to be part of working groups and committees on national, but also on a local level. In the context context of information sharing, we built a special working group that is an open forum for professional organizations and civil society with the aim to share news and discuss the key issues of drug policy. If needed, we meet also on ad hoc, for example, during COVID-19 pandemic, or now the situation on Ukraine and its impact on drug services in the Czech Republic. Now let me say some aspects why we have decided to officially involve civil society into decision-making process at national level. There are many and various reasons, but especially because the civil society are those who see the consequences of our decisions in practice, and they can provide direct feedback for the government on what is the practice and what should or what must be done. And they are also close to the drug scene and situation, and also to the needs of people who use drugs, and that's why they act on a draft of drug policy and intentions before they are officially approved. And also other key point is because the civil society can help us with the lobbying, especially for funding of drug policy at national level. However, although we all know questionable role of civil society, sometimes we know that they are criticized for lobbying and for their own interest, and the civil society also must face strong discussions regarding their involvement in a decision-making process, and even they are part of working groups and committees. Their representation is not equal to state administrations. Due to this point of view, it is necessary in the long term to build a mutual understanding and trust among the state institutions and the civil society. In this regard, I would like to point it out the word mutual, because the mutual understanding and cooperation is a very important and key aspect of this cooperation. This partnership also must be based on active participation, contribution, and involvement of a whole spectrum of civil society. It means NGOs, drug services, but also academy and research organizations, umbrella organizations, also expert organizations, and we shouldn't forget also for organizations of people who use drugs. And at the end of my speech, I would like to highlight that we shouldn't also forget for the role and direct influence of civil society in advocations of demand reduction, especially harm reduction investment, and in supporting harm reduction approach as a whole. Okay, that's all from my side, and thank you again for this opportunity.
Thank you very much for joining, and the support of national government is always a key issue, as you so thoroughly pointed out. I'll now give the floor to Max Cato from the Pompidou group for, I think, what will be closing remarks. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and hello from Strasbourg to everybody. Katarina, you said actually some very important things, which I personally find we hear too little in these conversations. It is trust and understanding, because these are the elephants in the room. And I personally have the impression when civil society meets government representation, they're never alone. There's always a herd of elephants in the room, and we don't talk about these enough. These include issues of understanding, which practically means we not always speak the same languages. We speak with different terminology. We have different understandings and meanings about terms. We have very often different expectations which are not properly articulated from both sides. This leads to misconceptions. And also, in the end, the elephants in the room they lead to frustration, and they, as a consequence, lead to a situation where the potential, the cooperation between civil society and governmental structures can never be fully unearthed. So I do think it is very important that these issues are addressed. And the Pompidou Group has adopted a policy paper on government interaction with civil society on drug policy issues, which includes principles, ways and means, and identifies opportunities and addresses the challenges. Maybe this is something which falls in line with what Peter has been saying, not as quality standards, but again, as a set of principles and ideas that would help to overcome the difficulties and would help to constructively address the elephants in the room. It would mean that one looks at different forms of cooperation. What is possible and feasible at what stage of the interaction process? And what are the moments in time and the concrete opportunities for engagement? And who can play what concrete role best in their capacity and in view of their different goals? And also we must look at what are the means and tools for cooperation. It's not only the question of financial resources. We must see how we can invest the financial resources and means and tools that actually are useful for facilitating a fruitful cooperation. And of course, we must clearly and openly and honestly look at where the challenges are in terms of compatibility between our different structures. Civil society organizations and governmental structures are very different animals. They function according to different rules. Their shareholders, so to say, or their internal stakeholders have different expectations. We must see how we deal with that. We must see where we find compatibility in this garden and how we can overcome any barriers. The policy paper by the Pompidou Group actually gives a lot of guidance on these, and I'll make it available to the organizers and hope that they can be widely distributed. Yeah, in conclusion, I really would like to come back to what Katarina said, and this is my big hope for the interaction between civil society organization and governmental structures, and that is, I sincerely hope that we invest more time and energy in building more trust and understanding between each other. Thank you very much. The Pompidou Group stands ready to be the platform for this.
Thank you very much. And we do engage with the Pompidou Group as a CSFD. So thank you for joining us and for these very interesting remarks on the question of the elephants in the room. I think we will need to close now. It's such a pity because this was a brilliant event and it was really interesting. I would have loved to spend the morning with you and discuss furthermore. Please note, however, that this recording will be uploaded to YouTube and the link will be sent to you as participants, so you'll have a chance to engage also in the comment section. Thank you very much for this event and for the incredible speakers that we had. I'd like to say see you soon in real life, hopefully, or online if we can't make it to Vienna anytime soon. Thank you very much. Plenty of courage for people working in Eastern Europe these days, and hopefully see you soon. Thank you.